very warm welcome to Capital Sports 3.0. I am your co-host, or one of your co-hosts, Alan Moore, and we're going to get going in just a moment. Have a video to start off our whole show with. We kind of like to mix it up a little bit, so you're going to enjoy this video, but I'll tell you what was coming up tonight. So we're going to start off straight away with some ashes and sportsmanship, or lack of sportsmanship in this case. We're also going to talk about the Tour de France, what's happening there. We're going to look at Wimbledon. That's going to be a bit of a touchy subject, but we're going to go through it because it's going to be a very different tournament this year. Trust me on that. We're also going to speak about the Just Stop Oil because those idiots were at it again last week. And we've discussed this before. We know the opinions of the vast majority of sports fans and the vast majority of people, but it's just not stopping. It's going to get worse. And we're going to see it this week in France, even though France is in civil war at the moment, or rebellion, or wherever it may be. And we're going to see it at Wimbledon. Trust me on that. They are planning for Wimbledon. It's going to be a biggie in Wimbledon. So we're going to start that in just one moment. But we're going to start off with a video from today, and then discuss it with the guys in just one moment.
It's another short ball. Oh, now this is going to be interesting. Johnny Bairstow's walked out of his crease here. This could well be out. I don't think there was a call of over. Johnny Bairstow's ducked and then walked out of his crease. Alex Carey's just thrown the ball at the stumps and hit them. This is going to be interesting.
TFV umpire to director. We have umpire's review for run out. It's at the striker's end. First side on, please. Can you give me a side on, please? Roll through, please. Okay, I have a decision for the screen.
Yep, no great surprise to me.
So what happened there, basically, I'll explain it very, very simply. I'm going to ask you guys there in just one moment what they think of it. The over was called. So with last ball of the over, the English batter, Johnny Bairstow, he stepped out of his crease. Just, okay, ball went behind. He ducked, went over his head, and pretty goobly bouncer went into the wicketkeeper's hands. The wicketkeeper saw him walking forward, because as most batsmen do, and threw it at the stumps, thus getting him out. Now, it went around the simple rule of, was the ball settled in the wicketkeeper's hands? The referee said, the umpire said no. The video said no. And of course, like the computer, they also said no to England, that it was out, and he walked. Now, of course, England went on to lose the test. They shot themselves in the foot as well, but this is Bairstow going at it when he was on 10, and he was going quite well, starting quite well. England were chasing a realistic total to beat the Australians and level the series at 1-1 today in Lords. It caused a lot of ructions afterwards. There were scraps, fights afterwards. There was a lot of words being said as well. And it goes down to Australian sportsmanship or gamesmanship. So I'm going to go straight away into the Englishman on my right. Andrew, was it a fair out? Andy Mack said it was, but he's Scottish, so he's a bit biased. But was it a fair out? And does that just go to Australian gamesmanship?
Well, short answer, yes, it was. Because Bairstow, quite frankly, is an idiot. You never, ever, in virtually any sport, but especially one with cricket like this, where we've had so many controversies about run-outs, don't give them a chance. Why wander out of your crease? Why wait? Or why not wait just a few seconds just to be absolutely 100% sure? There's no need to rush out of your crease, literally within a second, 2 seconds of the ball passing over his head. I mean, people can whine and whinge all they like about it being sport. I don't see anything remotely related to sportsmanship in this, or lack of. English fans will go down the same old route of old, same old Australians cheating, and they do have a history of using the rules to the full extent that they can. But personally, in this example, I don't really see what the problem is. I mean, you can see from that replay, he ducks down, ball goes over his head. He takes one, possibly, before he even planted his foot for the second step, the ball has already hit the stump. So you can tell there's no delay. It's not exactly like he stood there, the wicketkeeper's caught the ball, stood up, waited, and thought, oh, actually, hang on a minute, I can do this. He threw it straight away. I don't see what English fans can complain about there. It's a lack of concentration. You play to the whistle, whichever sport it is. Of something like this, he's only got himself to blame, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think that is fair enough, because you have to try and wait until you hear it. But again, it's just such a natural thing. We see it. I did play when I played in school, where basically thought it was okay and like stepped out of the crease. Nobody got me out. Actually, I think they went to stump me, but I was able to get my hand back. I actually switched the bat into my left hand. So does that go into Australians? Because we know what the Australians do. I have a video in a moment. The typical archetypal Australian mentality. But is that normal, or should that be normal?
I suppose I will just say that there was actually an apology came out this evening in the last hour or so about the scenes that we're seeing, about an apology to Cricket Australia about some of what happened afterwards, because there was obviously a lot of frustration. So I would just say I agree, by the letter of the law, what Australia did in going upstairs, as in having it checked so that he could be ruled out, that's technically perfectly okay, acceptable by the letter of the law. The only thing I would say is there are occasions in cricket, and it does happen quite regularly, where in a situation similar to that, basically the batter will make some form of acknowledgement to the umpire that he's leaving. So basically say, right, we're done. So there's something that it's kind of gone, okay, he's acknowledged in his head, it's finished and over. And there is a certain level of, I wouldn't even say like a gentleman's agreement to the way that runs, but it is kind of treated as such that if he's walking away and he's made some acknowledgement, as far as he's concerned, it's done, and everyone considers it done. It's kind of like when you kick the ball to your opposing team in football when a player is down injured, or you kick it out. It's just a thing where it's almost like an accepted norm in certain circumstances. I agree, a game isn't over until the final whistle sounds, but there are instances where it wouldn't be an uncommon thing to happen, in the sense of it doesn't happen obviously in every game, but if it happens, there is a certain level of almost an acknowledgement that that's okay. There is just further announcement that 3 members of one of the cricket societies, obviously I'm assuming fans, have been banned from Lords as a result of some of the conduct over the course of today. But I think there has to be a level of acknowledgement that these things can be seen in other cricket games, and it's not always a case of you don't have to go and have it checked upstairs. Some people would take the sportsmanship and go, he clearly thought it was done. He saw it going to the wicketkeeper turn. Did he walk away? Now, again, game isn't over till the game's over, but there is that certain level of, is it something that we would expect to see from every team? Probably not. Is it something we're in no way shocked when it's the Australians? Probably. And that's one of those instances where you go, a team's reputation goes before them. So sometimes their conduct you will associate with, would you not have taken a more sportsmanly approach? Because it's obvious he feels that that is an end. Letter of the law is different, I think, to sportsmanly conduct. So, I think there are 2 sides to the approach taken. The minute you're going upstairs to have it checked and you're appealing for it to be checked, it's a bit like you weren't 100% sure if you were in the right, but you're going to push it.
And that's the thing in cricket. Normally, like if they usually, I mean, one time, the only one time I reacted badly was when I was given out for LBW, and no way was I out. 100% I wasn't out. I knew I wasn't, because I knew what I was doing, and the umpire gave out, and I was like, okay, and I argued with it, and everyone was like, why are you arguing with him? Like, you don't do that, you just walk. So, and it wasn't that I didn't understand that. I wouldn't argue in football, or even Andrews played in Gaelic football. I wouldn't argue the toss. I was okay, fine, but it was that moment felt really icky. I
think his reaction as well, like when he turns around, it's quite obvious in his head he fully thought it was done. This wasn't like that's what I think makes it a bit more just unsportsmanly. And again, that's not how sports is about the rules and applying the rules of the game, and that's just the way it goes. But
that's it. And this is what, again, as Isa said, and we could play international rules when Ireland played Australia in mixed rules between Aussie rules and Gaelic football, and show what they think of sport and how they bring it to a level that's like way beyond sport. But this is something that went before them. It's 42 years old now, so it's older than all both of you, but not me. But this will this basically has damaged Australia's reputation in cricket, especially as a sporting nation. But in cricket, this has gone down in history, and I think the commentators explain it quite well. And we'll of course give it explain when we come back in just 1 second.
Ian Smith is out, bowled Trevor Chappell for 4, 8 down for 229, and New Zealand's only hope now is a 6 off the last ball for a tie.
Long discussion. Well, it looks to me as if they're going to bowl underarm off the last ball. Rod Marsh is saying no, mate, but I'm sure he's going to bowl an underarm delivery on the last ball and bowl it along the ground and be sure that it has not been hit for 6. The umpires have been told, the batsmen have been told, and this is possibly a little bit disappointing. Let's make sure it is an underarm, but I've got the feeling as a big ex-Victorian skipper, we're going to bowl an underarm. We ever believed it? And that's a disappointing finish. Disappointed Brian McKechnie, the crowd boo. And it's all over. After 50 overs, New Zealand 8 for 229. Well, that's disappointing. Bruce Edgar saying, what's going on? But very disappointed, Bruce Edgar. At the moment, Howard coming onto the field.
No wonder the New Zealanders are disappointed, and none of them more disappointed than their skipper, Geoffrey Howe. There he is now, talking with the 2 umpires Cronin and Weezer, and I know exactly the reason he's out there. He's played his cricket over in the United Kingdom.
Now, I hope that played okay. I think it did play. We just stopped it a little bit short. The whole thing was that New Zealand needed a 6 off the last ball. This was at the time, it was in 1980-81. It was the World Series between Australia, New Zealand and India. And the series stood at 1-1 at that moment. And it was in Melbourne Cricket Ground. And bowling underarm means that, like, you know, he can't hit the ball anywhere. He just has to stop it. And it was the captain told his brother to do it. So it just showed the level that this desire to win. The New Zealand Prime Minister, Robert Muldoon, basically said, like, well, you know, it's appropriate that Australia were wearing yellow because they're cowards. So, again, when you look at it, it's kind of like one of those strategies, like, it's a horrible thing to see. But again, as Isa said, like, you win at all costs. We remember Munster being done out of a Heineken Cup title when basically the ball had come out the side of a scrum. Remember it? And the guy put it back in his hand. I can't remember who did. All these things have happened. You know, Bloodgate happened, for example, in rugby. So this is normal. We do think of, you know, we would do better. We'd want to do better. But what if our team did that? What if our team did that? How if they won that way? How would we react? We'd like to think that we would be up in arms. The French were not complaining when France qualified by Thierry Henry putting the ball into an Irish net with his fist. The Argentinians playing about.
I suppose, do we question though about the spirit? Like, cricket is, they love the spirit of the game stuff. So it's not about the damage for each individual team. It's about the damage it does to the image of a sport that people will. It's like, do you know what? It's also the fact that his back is to the person who's doing it. I think that actually really adds to the drama of it.
Yeah.
It's like you're throwing it at his back as he walks away.
It is that is very, very true. I mean, there's many instances of this, but this is quite a more recent one. I think it's from Mexico. And this comes down to, like, it's not over until, well, I won't say the fat lady sings because that's probably going to get me cancelled, but it's not over until it's over. So this is one that really you have to look behind it.
Le va a pegar de parte interna. ¡Ah! Le pegó con el empeine al final y la puso en el travesaño. ¡Gol! ¡Increíble! 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 No lo puedo creer. Lo que acabo de ver se ve una vez cada 10 años. Increíble el gol de Diego Campillo.
Del portero.
Diego Campillo, te encargo que salgas de aquí y te vayas a comprar un boleto de lotería, por favor. Increíble el gol.
Well, if your Spanish is good as mine, that means incredible, incredible, incredible. That was amazing. But again, you don't turn your back on the ball. I mean, there's lots of instances of those. Isn't it? It's great. It's great.
That one was funny, but there is a common thread between all three examples we mentioned so far. Assumption is the mother of all mistakes that you create for yourself. I mean, there's different levels. Of course, there are different levels and nuances. And cricket's problem here, which is why I think it's become such a heated debate, is that cricket sells itself as a sport that revolves around the spirit of the game. I would argue, I'm not saying rightly or wrongly, but so much more than other sports. This, the way that decisions are made, the fact it's an umpire, not a referee, to resolve disputes between people, not to dictate the rules themselves. That makes a big, big difference. People forget that. You don't say cricket referee, and people have sort of shifted the era of VAR, the era of minute depiction of every single replay decision. It's distilling it into a scientific look at sport, and part of me agrees with that. With the Bairstow thing, for me, it falls on the side of too much assumption. Yes, you can argue against the spirit of the game. Personally, I think he actually just went a little bit too far assuming that. But it is.
I think if he'd spoken, it wouldn't have been an issue. I think if he'd acknowledged it to the umpire that he was walking away, oh, we're done, even said anything,
made it a bit more obvious and clear. Yeah, I can take that point. I do take that point, to be fair.
Because I think the umpire then would have said it, and then it would have been, he thought this was at an end, and it would have changed how it was viewed.
It would have.
I think it would have.
Look, I think we also look at assumptions like we also have the dark arts, and in rugby, for example, we look at how I mean, I was watching 2 matches that I played 16 years ago, and watching with Tim on a video, and we're watching them playing, and then when I was watching it, I remember thinking, oh my God, like at the time my memory was that the other team were the referees were bad, atrocious, and then I looked when I started noticing one of our guys, like for example, going in the side of a scrum and not being noticed because the referee was basically, he saw the referee was distracted and he went in the side and absolutely hammered someone out of it. And it was complete. It was actually a red card offence what he did. I didn't see it because I was basically I went back to him, but I was thinking, if I had seen it, what would I have done? Like, would I have called the referees and said, hold on, wait, like you shouldn't be coming in here? I don't know what I was doing that time, but he deserved a red card. But,
So many sports are focused on, obviously Andrew has departed there briefly, so many sports are focused on the dark arts. So we have rugby as a prime example, like Richie McCaw would have been the poster boy for the dark arts, and also how he dealt with referees. So he had a combination of both. It was the ability to do something and then to almost have a referee believe he didn't see what he saw, or he saw something that was more marginally in line with the laws. The same with the likes of boxing. So much of it is what you can do on the inside and get away with. And a lot of sports are like that. But when a sport holds itself up to a higher pedestal and expects more, and something is unsportsmanly in how it's viewed, I think then it just causes controversy. And look, I've no issue with the English losing whatsoever. I just think perhaps maybe it just optically it didn't look great.
Yeah, I think the optics, you're dead right. It's the optics definitely the issue. So, okay, we're going to go to a quick break and then come back with some Tour de France. So hopefully Andrew will rejoin us. He's still going to message him in our WhatsApp chat and see is he still online. So back in just a moment. We'll come straight back with the video from the Tour de France. Now, we didn't expect it. I thought that this was a stage for what they call the puncheurs, the punchers, the guys who are, like strong legs, but good climbers as well, and who can basically the hills, there was a lot of very, very short, sharp hills, especially the last one in the Basque Country. So it was going to be very, very difficult for them to for mountain climbers, it wasn't for them. Sprinters, it wasn't for them. But this guy, Lafay, broke away, the French guy, 27 years of age, shocked the world. I mean, no one was expecting it. However, it's starting to form up behind him, as in the classifications, because the favourites, including last year's winner Jonas Vingegaard, they're all starting to move up the ranks now, because Adam Yates, the English guy who won yesterday, he is still in first place. Tadej Pogačar, my old friend, he is in second place. Simon Yates, the brother of Adam, came second yesterday, he is in third. Lafay has moved up to fourth place now. He's 12 seconds. That's his tour done. He'll drop down gradually, and he'll finish, but he will drop down. So it's great for Cofidis that they win after a 15-year gap. Then you've got like Wout van Aert, who's in fifth place, Jonas Vingegaard, and Michael Landa, who's they set to come up as well. So there's a lot of these guys who were just fighting for it. This was not realistically. This is not going to be one for the guys who are going to be finishing the top of the tour. In any case, it wasn't for them. That's not what they were looking for, because they are saving their legs, because they're not going to gain enough time on this to make a difference. Even though Wout van Aert finished second today and Pogačar came third. So, but it wasn't for them. Even Pidcock came fourth. Isel, are you taking any interest whatsoever? Is there any interest in the Tour de France this year in Ireland? Because there's no Irish riders for the first time in a long, long time.
Well, I personally will be taking an interest. I think we will see it drop down the media attention here, in the same way with when you have Irish riders involved, it becomes much more interesting, especially because we've seen success in the last few tours. So it made it a lot more user friendly in Ireland, because we were obviously seeing them on the news as a daily event, just even reporting, even when they didn't have a good stage, because obviously we're talking about sprinters. I think I will take a greater interest after today. Today was a big GA day, and the weekend was quite a big GA weekend in Ireland, which obviously took up a lot of time, as was last night a big boxing night. But I did find, when I saw today's stage, I thought it seemed to me, and again, this may be my ignorance, it seemed like a very strange stage. And I suppose as you were describing it there, it was short hills. I just thought it seemed like a kind of the sort of stage you would have for the everyday rider, as in the sense of it wasn't advantageous to either side of the divide, either your sprinters or your guys who can go and go. Like, it just felt, it was kind of like a mid-distance run, but bizarrely set out. It's kind of how I felt about when you have stages where there's cobbles. I don't like them, because I think it changes the dynamic of the race from being about an even keel for people of different, like, let's say you have the sprinter stages, you have your time trials, then you have the mountains. It just, I don't know why, I just disliked it when I saw the layout of it. I will watch part of it back, but I think it's obviously good for French morale in terms of sport. Perhaps, I don't know what the coverage is like in France at the moment itself, actually, in terms of the tour, because obviously there is a huge amount of unrest there presently, and I don't know if it's necessarily a big an event. It will obviously become a big event as the days roll on, but I think it's a strange one. I think also we obviously have Wimbledon starting, so it's a very exciting couple of weeks now of where you can really get into a very changeable landscape. And as you said, we're starting to see some of the field even already that are starting to congregate and move up, which will add to the competition as the stages go on. I personally, I like stages that are one thing or another, in case you can't tell. I don't like those confused ones. And when you're saying punchy, look, it's good to have different people at winning stages, even if that's probably, as you put it, the end of his tour, by and large, not the end of his tour as in the final stage. But I think it will be interesting to see where it goes from here, because I think they are all so bunched together, and I think the gap is so small now at the top end of cycling, and that's what makes it really interesting. I suppose I've gone down a wormhole of listening to some Lance Armstrong new series of podcasts this week. So, and I usually at this time of year, what I'm doing is I'm listening to all the tour ones, and I found myself listening to a different series. So this week will be immerse myself back in Johan Bernil and Lance, because I actually love their analysis, because no matter what way you view how they approach the tour in terms of the extra help, they still can analyze the cyclist so brilliantly. Like, it is really interesting to listen to Johan, because he knows the stages, he knows everything about the way a team needs to, how a team needs to approach it. And I think that's one of the most interesting things about cycling, because you are kind of, to an extent, under starters' orders in the same way as we see it in Formula One, and we give out when we see in Formula One a driver told to pull back. But in cycling, it's remarkably interesting in the Tour to see a team dynamic, particularly in a sport that most people look at it and can't understand how it works as a team sport.
Oh, that's it. And
the domestiques, and it's just there's a lot to enjoy in the complexity of the Tour, because it's the only time it's consistently on. Like, obviously you do have the other competitions, but not to the same level of coverage.
No, and look, even with Brunel knew everything about motor doping, about chemical doping, blood doping. He was an expert because he came through the European system, where it was really the best of the best. Doesn't matter. Americans, I mean, Lance Armstrong said he started doping before he even came to Europe. So it was there, but in Europe it was a different level. Speaking of Paul Kimmage, as he would say, the Americans, they knew what they're doing. Irish tried. But you go to Europe and but they can analyze it very well. I mean, was it 2-3 years ago, 2020, when we were on radio? That was the first time I started watching a Tour, and I started to enjoy it because I just stopped thinking about what's going on. Because now, as you mentioned, Scott, the next moment we're going to bring up yesterday, I think, was the burial of this boy, 17-year-old, who was killed by the police. Police would apologize. Guys getting charged, like, they're trying to calm it down. Of course, Emmanuel Macron said that, it's because of computer games. They're also finding that weapons that were being sent to Ukraine are now actually coming back to France and being used. So it's a very scary moment in France. Speaking with some French people this weekend, and they're sheltering, and speaking with someone who are coming to the World Games in 3 weeks' time now in Ireland, they're also worrying about what's going to happen. Some of their trainings were cancelled because they can't go out. They have to get in before nightfall because they know what's going to happen after dark. And there's such chaos. And this is the thing that's going to hit the Tour de France, because this is an area now where the race is going to go through. And this is what normally we see, like the motorbike going through, ahead of the peloton or the leaders, and leading them through and get the great camera work and so on. This is what we love. And those guys get paid massively, and some of the women as well get paid massively to hang on the back of a bike and make a video of someone come up. This is what they will be seeing if they were going through one of the routes right now.
L'étoile rouge devant ma face, c'est un diplôme d'honneur pour elle, rien pour moi. Mon honneur s'efface peu à peu, chez nous les cœurs se glacent très tôt. La peur se tasse, pour rien les frères se fracassent. Les patates volent, les mauvais coups s'enchaînent comme cette chienne de vie habituée au vacarme. Pour éviter les larmes dans les poches, les gosses glissent des larmes. Pas facile de vivre avec des drames. Micro en main, j'envoie ma carte de soucis sur ton phonogramme. Régénère la flamme. Des vrais poètes de rue ne soient pas détendus. L'atmosphère est tendue, ou sur les cordes à linge. Ton corps va jouer le pendu. J'ai conçu ce texte face au but. Mes rimes claquent les papes comme les ch'taps d'arnouches qui jouent les baraques. Les pieds dans les flaques de pisse, mon quartier craque. Dans les blocs, les appareils nous braquent. Flash sur les cloques, l'histoire finisse.
Slightly different in rolling hills, monasteries, and if you're watching it, as I always do, watch the chopper flying over and go, oh my God, look at that castle. Now you're seeing a burnt out high-ace van. It's almost like being in Limerick, but Isold knows that. Andrew's having trouble trying to get back into it. Isold, one thing to say that they have, speaking with people who are, a person involved in one of the teams is going through, and he said that they've been told there's an alternative route to stay down in the Occitan, that area. So it's up sort of like where they're racing now is in Bilbao, and they're crossing the border tomorrow. Or actually to cross the border now, but they have that area kind of from Grenoble all the way to the Atlantic coast, Aquitaine. They could be racing there. They might not even move further south, and definitely not go to Marseille and those areas that have also been hit very hard. And of course, Lille in the north, very troubled area, that's also been hit. Would that take away the joy of the Tour de France? Because we all know that when the Tour de France came to Ireland in 1998, it was hammered by like a guy coming along in a car full of drugs. Is that going to be an issue?
Well, when the tour came to Ireland, I can remember being somewhere in Waterford, outside. I'm going to say somewhere between. There's a road to Youghal, which is actually in Cork, and a road to somewhere like with Dungarvan. And anyway, we're on this hill, and it goes by, and you're like, that's that done. So but I think the big thing for the tour, there's a few components to this. I think when sometimes sport has a great unifying, galvanizing, really bring a country together in the face of real tragedy and unrest. I think the difficulty here is that the tour is, firstly, it's an annual event. So it isn't that one-off event that people will suddenly flock to as a method of, I suppose, uniting or trying to see a public outpouring in some other way. I think the difficulty is in terms of what's going to happen in the next few days. Obviously, the funeral of the young man was today, I think, to the best of my knowledge, which has led to yesterday, which led to last night's riots being amplified. I do know I've friends who are in Paris currently, and they were saying they could hear them from quite a distance away, like from where they were, which was nowhere near the riots, just due to the level of, like they were saying, 45,000 police were out last night.
Yeah.
So it gives you
1,000 arrests,
to give context to how bad things are. But I think we need to also factor in that and I hate to say it, from a purely logistical point of view, I'm sure that the Tour de France has, like most major sporting tournaments, unless it was the Rugby World Cup had it come to Ireland, which is why we didn't get it, they all have contingency backup disaster plans.
Yeah.
So they could be to factor in security issues, to factor in natural disasters, to factor in any number of things that will need you to change your route. The difficulty, I think, here is you probably have entire teams and entire networks of events that have planned out one route. If they have to go to route B, I don't know what the logistical impact will be, not just on things like teams and where they stay, on camera crews and where they need to move to, because it's not just the camera in front, it's the other ones that are set up around. It's also in terms of if you have facilities such as medical facilities, which are not linked to necessarily the tour's own. I presume that they have certain hospitals that if there was to be a major accident, that they would be providing other support, let's say their ambulances or whatever else. The point is, it's a huge logistical matter to move the tour. Now, presumably the route can move quite close to where it already is. I think this will be obviously an evolving situation over the coming week and weeks. So it becomes a case of, I would say they are probably going to have to play it very much by ear. But if you take certain other routes, presumably that impacts the way the stages are going to be set out, which also, from a team point of view, because we've just discussed how cycling is such a tactical and team-based sport, if they change the routes and go to an alternative to avoid certain areas, that's going to change how teams have to structure and plan for certain riders. Because if you're timing this out, this is a multi-week event.
Exactly. They have set this out, as you said, with riders who are like climbers, sprinters, punchers. This is, as you said, this is a science how they do it. It's really tactical. They need to know who has enough in their legs to get us through here, who's going to carry the team, and so on. So it's difficult. Andrew, watching it, I mean, a lot of well, of course, the British cycling fans who come down to watch not Team Sky, Team Ineos now, or Ineos Grenadiers, a lot of them have actually cancelled their travel down. A lot of British tours as well have not gone down to France. If this rolls on, I mean, when we saw the pension protest, that was okay, but now they're using bloody heavy weapons, and I mean, this has gone beyond norm. So, I mean, is sport worthless at this stage?
Yeah. It's. I would almost say we're starting to get towards unknown territory at this point. With cycling events in particular, the very nature of it, of course, it's impossible to police every single kilometre of a course. So it's basically tailor-made for protesters, people who have a point to make. This is going way beyond this. The situation in France at the moment, it's very, very hard to see it calming down just because there's a sports event going on. As we've seen in so many examples, it seems the last few years in particular, protesters are getting bolder and bolder. It's like he sort of says, the planning behind just to make one route, let alone a backup route, reserve route, change route, how much notice do you legally have to give teams? I mean, within the context of the sport, the amount of investment going into it, you can't just simply say, right, we're going to go somewhere different tomorrow. But I mean, the amount of movement around, the distance covered, it's an incredibly open-ended situation. I mean, I admire anybody who is able to successfully, safely stage such a major sporting event that covers so much distance like this. And the organisers they've got a lot on their hands. Look, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm expecting to hear more, unfortunately, disappointing, dangerous, concerning news of some kind. I desperately hope it isn't. But look, are we going to be realistic or are we going to be hopeful? Personally, I'm concerned about a number of things. Safety of the cyclists themselves, safety of the spectators. I mean, I don't want to be a doom monger, but it just simply is the nature of the current situation outside the sport itself. Even if we didn't have the current situation, virtually every year you're going to have to worry. Like you guys have mentioned, you have to have contingency plans for any sporting event. Cycling in particular has more challenges than most. So I pray and hope that people realise there's a point to be made, but there's a way to make it. And there's a place and a time and a place for it without endangering others. You can still make a point if that is what you choose to do. But I'm not hopeful.
Well, look, I think we all understand them without, like, the situation. Speaking with a friend of mine, John White, he's the secretary of Games Europe, and as he said, like, it looked very clear like there was, it would be called a murder or manslaughter, like shooting that happened. That's the way it looked. And then you look at the other hand, like, he's 17-year-old in a car share. The police were trying to get him to stop. He went to drive away. It's a split second, so we can't put ourselves, like, we don't know what happened at the time. We don't know the kid's background. We will never know this background because they won't want to put it out no matter what. If he was an autoboy, if he was clean, pure as driven snow, if he's a great kid, then it's like, what was he in the car? What was it? So we'll never know. And it's not, to be honest with you, the facts are not important in this. No one cares about the facts. People will go out. The people who have weapons, and you see them like shooting out lights and lampposts with these rifles, high-powered rifles that were being sent from Accuracy International, that have been sent to Ukraine, and that are back. But
what you don't want to see is another young person dead as a result of
this. Is it?
Which
and
is the fear.
Like, you see, there was a man who, like, savagely beaten, like, lost one of his hands, and all, like, and it's like this. Alexander said, it just has to stop. And the one thing, these people who you wouldn't mind shooting, well, I shouldn't say that, shooting them or beating them. Well, beating them, yeah, it'd be good. And what we're going to talk about next. So back in just a second, straight in with a video, and this boils my blood. It boiled my blood last week, so here we go.
Absolute fucking legend, Johnny Bairstow.
Apologies for the language. That wasn't me. That wasn't Andy. That was the person who said in the video. The usual idiots just stop oil, go out, throw their stuff around the place to get attention. We saw them. They did it at the rugby, and they were, like, lifted out again by rugby players. Personally, you have a cricket bat, you've got stumps there as well that you can use for these people, and I would impale them on the stumps because, again, all is coming out about them, about who they get their funding from, where they get their funding, what they're doing. It's just so wrong. And also, we're looking at this as like, it's just about climate and so on. Think about, again, how easy it would be for an absolute psychopath to run on with a knife hatchet.
They've just showed them the way.
Exactly. And this is why, and we go back again, I always go back to this again, so we've done since last year, why it's not bad that Russian teams, whether they be wheelchair teams, whether they be blind football, women's football, Zenit St. Petersburg, Russian national team, that they're not playing in Europe where they would have to go into qualifying competitions or into Champions League or UEFA or Europe or whatever, because people will see how easy it is with these idiots that make no point, actually anger people towards climate. And they'll follow this lead. And then we saw, like, I mean, it's beyond frustrating for me. And I was I was angered by it. But again, I'm looking from the safety point of view. And there's such hypocrisy around it all. I mean, this week we saw, as it was very funny, I think Fox News put it out that the latest world leader to visit Ukraine, Greta Thunberg. Oh my! Whoa! This is a headline in Fox News, and it was picked up. It was like, she's the latest world leader to visit. I'm thinking, she's a 20-year-old girl who didn't even finish school.
The worrying part is that's not actually entirely inaccurate. She's a world leader of people who need to think.
She's an opinion leader. It's true, and I was thinking, okay, Greta, she's dead right. Ask about what happened with the dam, because they've now fudged that to one side. But I'm like, Greta, ask them about the depleted uranium. I'm sorry, but that's coming. I'm sorry. I link this back into English cricket. They sent all the depleted uranium, and they've used it in Yugoslavia. They've used it in Iraq, and so a bit of just stop oil protesters. Actually, I started to go, well, fair enough. Like, it's cricket, but no, I'm joking with that. But this is it's such massive hypocrisy. I mean.
Let's go back to what they're doing firstly. Let's not go on a political tangent here.
Okay, sorry. I'm angry by it because there's so. The guy who's been carried off. Sorry, I was going to say that the guy who's been carried off is wearing a pair of Nike. I'm sorry. If you want to make
someone doing an animal rights protest and they're wearing leather.
I'd eaten a hamburger. Okay, sorry, Eastwood, over to you. Sorry, Andrew. Okay, Andrew, start off. Ladies first.
The thing that there's so many frustrating parts of this. No matter what Johnny Bairstow does, whether he ignores the idiot coming on or does what he does, he's playing into their hands. You've got no choice in that point. It's being these people being let onto the stage. They win no matter what because they get their point. They get their moment in the sun. However, just as you mentioned, it's like their attitude is all press is good press, when in fact they're ignoring them. They're ignoring the side where I fully understand the concept that they claim to be promoting. Climate change is not something anybody can ignore. There are huge amounts of waste and pollution all over in every aspect of society. This is, like you say, it's turning people against them. And they think, it doesn't matter. We're getting our headline across. It's like, yes, it does matter, because you're turning so many people against your cause that, in fact, you're damaging the message you claim to be promoting. That's before we get onto the safety side of it. The actual basics of use more oil or use less oil, more green energy or not, you're damaging that message. It frustrates me. It frustrates me. They clearly it's gone way beyond. Even if we give them credit for, okay, they are actually genuinely trying to push a meaningful message. Even if we assume that's true, they're going beyond that. It's become a self-indulgent. How can I possibly get me, the person who is on this very Instagrammable moment, as much exposure as possible, ignoring what the actual cause is supposed to be? There's a complete disconnect in the brains at this point. But this is the fashionable thing nowadays. Not even just in protesting circles. How can you get your face in as much media, as much coverage as possible? Doesn't matter what the actual cause was in the first place. Most people are either angry about it or forgetting about it. What's the point?
I know. I mean, I go back. There's so much. These people who put themselves out. I said, Greta. We saw that Greta when they had the German police waited until her camera crew got into place to get, okay, ready, yeah, and then they're lifting her out of the German bog on cue. I was thinking, come on, good God, I live in Russia, so I kind of understand where there's theater at the top, and you kind of go, yeah, I don't believe this, and you look at the news and go, I don't believe this either. But you have to be able to believe something. I mean, So what's your take on this whole just stop oil? I mean, because they're going to come to Wimbledon, by the way. Like they're planning for Wimbledon. Wimbledon is going to be hit. It's going through their social media. Wimbledon. They said wait for Wimbledon. That's what they said. Like no, Dublin's like WT. What's Wimbledon West? SW19. They have like whatever they have like in the letters like SW19. Isa, what's your take on it?
Okay, well, there's a few things I find objectionable about it. I am going to say that I presume they're not all arriving on bicycle. They're travelling to all these sports events to interrupt them, which is one thing that obviously, look, there's practicalities. Even the environmentalists need to get from place to place. Andrew made some very good points about that. The idea is this is all to be Instagrammable, to have their moments like at probably their biggest moment was at the snooker, because that was a picture of she's up on the table. There's orange paint and dye gone everywhere. But what these idiots forget on their multiple list of things, I suppose, is that, as Andrew rightly put it, not all news and publicity is good publicity, because it actually has really driven a wave of people who are so infuriated that when they hear anything to do with them and their protests, it angers. It doesn't make people think of climate change. They think of these idiots who go out and disrupt, and they're not disrupting in a way. Firstly, on a lot of the sporting events they're disrupting, there is no connection between what they're disrupting and what they're trying to promote. It's random events picked, with the exception of possibly when they go to racing events, which also is a huge safety concern. But what I would say is, these events, they're also forgetting that there are people who, particularly to something like Wimbledon or the Ashes or the snooker, people have paid their hard-earned money, and we're in a cost of living crisis at the moment. People are saving up to go to these events, or they're once in a lifetime going to them, only to have some absolute scrote decide to get on a table and cover themselves in orange dye because they really think they're making a message. If you want to make a message and you want to make your voice heard, perhaps go into politics, perhaps find a peaceful way of protesting, because it's not peaceful when you do that. And that's the thing. You are not only risking the health of people around you, because you're breaking into a sporting arena, whether you're getting on from the sideline. How do you know if someone who chases after you, a well-meaning official trying to keep you off, doesn't have a heart attack? How do you know if you're not going to accidentally bang into someone's going to have an asthma attack? How do you know that the consequences of your actions aren't going to be someone else thinking, God, my cause is slightly more violent than throwing paint on myself, but I see how easy it is for these guys to get in. So maybe if I go in the same way they did, just go and attend and then just enter onto a field. There are lots of sporting events that don't come with metal detectors, that don't come with huge levels of security. I'm going to say snooker and cricket. Now, even after today with Lords, that might actually change after today, just to keep the Australians safe. But there is a huge level of risk in what they're doing, not in terms of their own well-being, in terms of the well-being of others. And what they're actually doing is just showing themselves as absolute idiots. I have big concerns. Like actually earlier today, and this is going to sound very stupid, but when the Formula One had come to an end and Verstappen had won, I looked at the TV and I had seen some of the cricket, obviously the footage from the protest last week. And then I looked at the TV and there were all the guys with their orange, I don't know what you call them. I can't think of the word now, I'm having a mental blank, where they're flares basically. And they have all the orange. And for a second I thought it was them. And then I realized they were all Dutch fans for Verstappen. But that's the kind of thing. And it galls people, because what they're actually doing is they're ruining events for a lot of people. And not just in terms of the people who are participating, in terms of the competitors and the supporters who are watching at home, but also the people who are spending money to go to them. And it's a level of selfishness, because if they actually wanted to make a difference, this isn't how they would go about it, as far as I'm concerned. I just also think that the safety concern aspect, like whatever about Wimbledon, I would be particularly concerned. I would expect to see something at Wimbledon. I would be concerned they don't start disrupting events, such as, obviously we're going to see it in Formula One, but also whether we see it, even though there's nothing anti-environmentalist about people cycling, apart from the mechanics of the tour operating and the fact that obviously Ineos fracking. Should we be concerned? But should we be concerned that we're going to see 20 or 30 men going at huge speeds on bikes being impacted by this, because that could be the disaster. And I'm not trying to encourage this, but that could be the event that they would, if I was a psychotic environmentalist who actually didn't have much of a brain cell in terms of actual policy change, but I wanted to disrupt an event, I'd either be going for the high speed cars or I'd be going for the high speed cyclists. And it's a big concern, because the escalation in their behavior is there. Like when I say I thought what went on at the racing was terrifying, even if you don't run out in front of the horses when they're moving, if you spook a horse, you can kill not only the rider, but other people or the horse itself. Like they're that stupid that they don't get what they're doing. People going out and gluing themselves to bloody fences. Like, leave them there. Run the horses at them and leave them there.
Exactly. And look, these are ideologues. And again, and I go back, I remember when I was director of college and we had our own newspaper magazine and called The Voice. And the second year of it, or the end of the second year, Greta Thunberg suddenly came into vogue. And so all these young teens that were studying in college, and girls were like, oh, she's so great, she's so brave. And I'm going, well, like I studied geography, like we did a big block of climatology with some of the best climatologists going. One, William Maunders from New Zealand, excellent New Zealand professor. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm also an archaeologist by training, so I know that climate varies over time. Weather patterns might change, but climate does alter and move. But when you hear her saying, we have 5 years to save the planet, that immediately, and we spoke with it, like, I spoke with this on the radio, that terrifies kids. That terrifies kids beyond belief. And then you've got these young, impressionable teens, and they hear this, and they're like, oh, I got to do something. What do I do to save it? And there are arseholes who are there ready to manipulate these young minds. The same as we saw them with, from political, the most insane, holders of the Führer's might were the Hitler youth. They were the ones who wouldn't stop fighting to the end because they believed, because it was this existential threat. Instead of going,
to be clear, we're not saying climate change isn't real, just before we get ourselves cancelled. We're not saying climate change isn't real, but we're saying the extreme actions you can garnish out of people who are at a stage where they're in their formative years. They're the much easier people to make extreme in everything they do.
And because all of them are connected to, I don't have my phone here, but they're connected only by phones, by laptops. They don't have a grasp on reality. We would have come to the age where we didn't have internet. I didn't have a group without internet to begin with. And, it's kind of this situation where they suddenly feel accepted. And there are these people, same as football hooliganism. You get these young guys who are lost and suddenly they find themselves part of something bigger. And there are people who manipulate and get them to do stupid things that will then end up in trouble, but they think they're part of something and want it. Whereas the people who are running these things are grifters. That's like, oh God, Andrew, companies, I know you want to say something, but again, it always comes back to me, it's like, people need to go out and just play a bit of sport. That's it. Play a bit of sport, talk a bit of sport, watch a bit of sport. Don't interrupt it. Don't run in front of a horse. Don't run in front of a car. No, run in front of a car if you think you're so bloody brave. If that's what you want to do it. Well, actually, no. And I come back onto, we have to be very careful. We're not, climate does change over time. Fact. Yes, if we pollute the environment, it's going to wreck the environment. That's what we should be looking at, to use less plastics and so on and so forth. To be kind to the environment, turn off lights better, and use less water. All these things, these help the environment. They help us save our resources. One thing that we had a video taken down this week, the guys know this, which shocked me when we were talking about Dylan Quirk. Now, immediately I'll say that COVID, and I've always said this, we said it radio here, COVID is a thing. Vaccines, they are as effective as people want them to be, and they work, and they give people great, confidence, and feel better about the whole situation. So
also safeguard vulnerable people from
exactly, which is important. Yeah. And we all went through. We know we didn't visit loved ones because we're afraid. People, my goodness, when Tim's his mom's husband's parents were dying in the next apartment. They couldn't go into them. They couldn't help them because they didn't know if we would make it worse. If they're sick, what would happen? So, and yet YouTube decided that us saying that there's stop talking about vaccines being harmful, stop talking about COVID being harmful. We're talking about the sudden death or death, and this is what we're speaking about. And we got our video, like our show, taken down, which I still don't understand why. And we were supportive of it. I don't know. I'm sorry. I had to make that point because it just annoyed me so much to see it because of everything. I know. I said. Like,
I think there is. I suppose. Look, I think there is a culture of people associate. They don't actually check what it's. We're in a world now where everything is like, oh, you can go on Twitter and something goes up and it's like, this post has been fact checked. Well, if you actually get the context
100%.
of what's being discussed, then it makes a huge difference. I totally agree with Twitter doing that, by the way. I actually think fact checking is really important, but you also have to go, there's a difference between saying vaccines are an increasingly important part of us into the future being able to live normal lives, because there will be other instances where we're going to need to look at vaccines as a way of safeguarding population. Vaccines have been a huge part of all of our lives since birth, I would say, because we've had things like
look at our
polio,
shoulder.
measles, mumps, rubella.
Look at our shoulders.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
It's a continual part of our lives. The difference is when someone has a cause of death, which is separate to that, you do need to differentiate, because to otherwise behave actually is more fear, it's more scaremongering, whereas there are lots, we all know that there are so many people who have died from various complications related to COVID. We actually, this week, I don't know if any of you are BBC fans, but I don't know, is she BBC? Is she Channel 4 perhaps? Kate Garraway was given an honour, and her husband is one of Britain's longest long COVID sufferers who has had horrendous, I won't say quality of life, but horrendous complications to his life since having COVID. So the importance of vaccines and the importance of people remembering that COVID did hugely damaging things to people both physically and mentally, and has had a long-standing effect on many economies and many communities. But you can't then be annoyed with people for saying something that wasn't COVID related. Like,
and this is what we said. We said that the people who are coming these like mad theories online, my immediate theory was either it was concussion related or it was doping related. But like,
he had a heart condition, a long-standing heart condition.
There you go. So I mean, like, so when you go, like, for me, logical is he suffered concussion because then that would blah 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 blah. It was doping, blah, blah, blah. But then when it was heart condition, well, yeah. But like when you think about when you hear it, you start to think through things. Of course, you would thought like that. I thought that first when I saw it, I was like, oh, did he got electrocuted or something? Like, you didn't know. But this is my sorry, Andrew. You're going to come in real quick. Our last topic today.
Well, I mean, you guys have basically distilled the most. I'd say one of the most worrying things about sport, protesting, absorbing what is happening. It's like that famous. I forget exactly who said it, but if your job as a journalist, if you hear one person say it's sunny outside and someone else says it's raining outside, your job is not to say it is sunny and raining at the same time. Your job is to look out of the window and see what is happening for yourself. Nobody does that anymore. Nobody takes the responsibility, the interest, the care to actually find out what's going on. They latch on to whatever is the most popular, most swaying, and keep coming back to Instagram. We live in a world of
convenience.
Well, there you go. We live in a world filled with weak-minded people. They can't be bothered to make up their own opinions and stand up for them because they're scared what other people will say about their own opinions. Not even opinions. They're confusing what is an opinion, what's a fact. If somebody says, I am against something on maybe religious, maybe scientific, maybe moral grounds, okay, you're allowed to have your opinion, but don't try and tell people it's a fact, which then you get a bit despotic about it. And that is weirdly something that humans are attracted to. When somebody's so violently strong about something, you think, I better say the same too. I'm scared to say anything against it.
This is it. People are intimidated. Andrew will put it this, and we all watch sports. I listen to sports and listen to sports radio, and good sports radio as well. It's a talk sport, for example, from the UK. good. I listen to American talk sport radio, like on ESPN or some of the, like the W fan radio stations and so on. And they're good, and listen to them. I'm thinking what we did, for example, think about in our show, we've had in I think successive weeks, Isa knows because again, Isa was part of Andrew too. We had a transition female speaking about her experiences and so on, and then the whole development and the views of it. We questioned, we asked direct questions of, for example, the age of transition, the whole lot, and bang, she asked like, no, children, no, and straight up, okay? Then we had someone who had a different point of view, who, like, we remember Inga Thompson, and he was there with me as well, and we were speaking with her. No, and she was coming from a different point of view, had different experiences, saw it as not being unfair, and also was like she didn't see the difference between a transitioned and a trans, or someone who identifies. And again, this is where it almost were. We discussed it openly, clearly, and we were, and one of the videos was taken down, and I was very quiet about it. I was like, okay, it was taken down because we were airing views that were harmful, microaggression, violence. I mean, okay, I thought Issa one time was going to get violent in one moment when we were talking with Inga, but that was because Issa wanted, like, we wanted to ask questions.
I think one of the things you're meant to do in any walk of life, and it's one of the things that we lose as a society, is the independent, as Andrew said, independent thought, but also to question what you're told. Like, in the sense of, if you want to learn about different people's viewpoints, and I know I tweeted about this during the week, I was listening to a podcast which really irritated me, and I kept listening. I found the views on it quite difficult to hear, but I kept listening because I was like, look, this is someone who on some level is by someone, I don't know why, recognized as an expert in a field that I think they've made up to cover the fact that they're just bigoted. However, nevertheless, I'm listening to this podcast and I'm going, this person has a greater knowledge of this area, whether I like their views or not, than I do. I'm going to listen to the end. And I did. Occasionally I will be much more childish and turn it off. And I got to the end and I went, there's some things that I could stop and question about my views. I won't in this instance, but I've had the opportunity to hear someone else's side, and I can go away and go, I'm comfortable in my views. Hearing the other side, I'm very comfortable in where I am. Because the idea is part of being, actually it's not just about being an adult, part of being a child. To the rest of your life, from childhood up, we learn to question what we're told. And the reason we do that is so we learn. And that's a continual process. It doesn't go away. So as we get older, we're going to hear views that we're more nuanced in our dislike of. But the ability to have a discussion with people and to understand things will maybe change our views or make us understand why other people hold theirs.
And look, your views can change.
Completely.
You can hear something. I've done it where I've heard something and kind of go, "Ooh, do you know what? That's actually quite right." Even, for example, last weekend with everything going on, I'm thinking, like, I'm watching the outside world reporting on it. We were speaking about it last week. And it's like, I'm going, this is all wrong. And then all of a sudden I was like, hold on. Yeah, what they're saying is wrong. They're actually telling lies. However, it's very interesting to see that point of view, because I have to, like, I'm speaking with my mom or speaking with an uncle or whatever, and I have to understand what they hear. And I don't want to contradict them and say, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. I don't care. I listen to them and say, okay, fair enough. That's your point of view. If they want to discuss things, like happened with one of my uncles, where when we started discussing, suddenly I realized, my Jesus, like, he's like a fan of Putin. He hates Zelensky. And I'm going, no. There has to be balance. That's it. And I'm arguing him to be balanced when he basically, from going at me, then turned around and went, like, actually had a different viewpoint, but nobody would listen to him because he was afraid to speak. Like, when I was home in December with Tim, I don't think we spoke with us. We met when we were having a drink, and I was on the bus going into the city centre. I forget where we're going in. So we're up in the double-decker bus and going into the city centre. The two girls sitting behind us are women. They weren't girls, they were women in their, I'd say, late 20s at least. And they're chatting away. And they started talking about what constitutes a real man. how's he look? And they started talking about all these fellas, they all look this, and they look very, they look too effeminate. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, I look around at them, because I look in the mirror, because I'm in front of the bus with Tim, and I look around at them. I'm thinking, okay, not talking about me. I'm not masculine or effeminate. I don't know, whatever. But like, I look around and I go, oh, and then they realize, and then your woman turned around and is like, Jesus, look at that. We can't even talk in private now. We can't. I was like, well, you're not in private. You're in a double-decker bus. But I could see they were terrible. And when Tim and I got up to walk out, we're going to watch Leinster play. That's what it was. So walking out, they put their heads down because they were embarrassed by voicing their opinion of what they thought a man should look like. I don't get but it's like people shouldn't be.
We've gone down a rabbit hole now.
Yeah, we've gone way up. Right, we're going to move because I know people are tuned in now. There's actually I've seen messages coming in that we have to go into the next one. We'll go straight in. Actually, no, we'll go for a little transition, and then the last bit, it's 30 seconds, and we'll have like a very, very quick recap on Wimbledon. So here we go, just back in 1 moment. Okay, that is Victoria Azarenko, former Grand Slam champion, Belarusian player. Well, she has no nationality for these championships, but she's back. We spoke with her before when she ran into Marta Kostyuk, and we spoke as well. Issa had a lovely viewing as well, where Victoria, she said, like, she personally, as one of the seniors in the tour, reached out to all the Ukrainian players and the Russian players and said, look, we have to stick together with this. We keep sport, keep sport, and help each other out where we can, get families out. This was her view. So she, of course, is going to be playing in Wimbledon this year. In the men's side, was starting tomorrow, of course. Well, the main draw starting tomorrow. So in the men's side, of course, you got 2 non-nation players in the top 7 seeds. Alcaraz, young guy, strange lad. He is number 1. Novak Djokovic going to break the record to make it his own. He's 2nd seed. Daniil Medvedev is 3rd seed. Kasper Ruud, Tsitsipas from Greece, they're 4th and 5th. Then Holger Rune from Norway and Andrei Rublev as well. He is there as the 7th seed. So, it's very hard to look past those top seeds, especially Djokovic. Alcaraz, well, very unlikely, but again, it's a really, really stacked draw, shall we say. Over the women's side, looking at the women's side, it's a little bit, I don't know if it's more open because Swiatek, the Polish girl, she's number 1. Sabalenka is number 2. And then all the way down to the players, Ons Jabeur, of course, runner-up last year, she's going again. Kvitova, former champion, going again, she's 9th seed. Kasatkina from Russia is 11th. Kudermetova, the girl who we don't really know her age, she's the 12th seed. Samsonova is down in 15th. So there's a lot of Russians and Belarusians there in the 32 seeds. I think there's 6 players altogether. One player's been in the bench, of course, the Croatian Swiss girl. She's going to give it a bit of a rattle as well. Looking at this, how is this going to play out? Because we do know that these idiots from Stop Oil are going to carry on. One of the things that was in the Telegraph, Daily Telegraph, from one of the I don't think it was their chief tennis writer, because they have one. There's another tennis writer who's going to cover Wimbledon, and they basically said, we want this year, because last year, of course, the ranking points are taken away. Money was there, but ranking points taken away because they banned the players from Russia and Belarus. This year, what this tennis writer said, was, please let the media accreditation be strict. We don't want politics and political journalists. That's not going to happen in Wimbledon, because it's going to be, if one of those Belarusian Russian players, as a regular we've seen practicing with her son, it could get out of hand. Or do you think that maybe the tennis fraternity will just rally around and say, stop?
I think they'll rally around, which is a great turn of phrase for it, but I do think they will. I think there's so many, perhaps in the last, even little things like seeing so many protests as of late at sporting events, seeing the risk to players in terms of whether they're being ostracized at home or ostracized at events or amongst their own peers by coming out with views one way or the other. I think Wimbledon, I think you will see it is a very straight way of dealing with that, and that is media accreditation. You're careful as to who you let in. And I think that might be the route to take here. Yes, you will always have rogue elements who will ask a question or who will make it uncomfortable for certain players, which in turn can make it uncomfortable for the entire group. I think maybe it would just be, and I'm someone who obviously says that I think there's politics and sports they're linked hugely in the fact that you have a platform as an athlete, whether it's to speak out about injustice, whether it's to speak out about causes, or whether it is just to let your views be known, because if you are particularly passionate about something, you may want to speak about it. I don't feel you always have to speak about it, and I don't think you should be forced to speak about it. I have that view across the board, whether it's in sport or not. However, all that being said, I think it might be refreshing for once if we could have one sporting event where we're not talking about the Saudis ruining sport with putting money into it, oil money ruining football. Sure, we all know Liv and the PGA have come to a truce. Like, we talk about Ineos in cycling and their connections with obviously fracking, and then we talk about how all the protests come in and ruin all of the sporting events across a multitude. Wouldn't it be just nice if athletes were asked, maybe just a break for 2 weeks? Like, let's take the summer holiday as being a holiday for all of our thought process too, and just say, why don't we ask these tennis players questions about tennis? And if we run out of questions about tennis, let's ask them about how they're finding staying in London. Let's ask them about the weather in London. Let's ask them how their kids are getting on if they're over and playing with them. Let's ask them who they have going into the celebrity royal box to watch them play. Let's do that. Let's just give everyone's brains a bit of time to just perhaps let the athletes perform, and let's not have questions after a tournament as to whether an athlete was unable to perform to their ability because they spent their time answering questions on political matters and worrying if their family back home will be ostracised or if they will be ostracised within their peers.
I think that's really well put. Just I wouldn't even want to top that, Andrew. I mean, that's it's an absolutely perfect take, and I really do. I think that's.
Exactly.
I think it's the one competition that can do it as well. I genuinely do. I
agree.
Can.
I agree. Last year, I do think Wimbledon made a huge faux pas in banning the players. They lost it. This year, they realised that they lost so much money last year that they were like, this is. I think that they did something at the behest of the British government, and were sold down to Swanee because we saw the people then like Johnson Trust, the merry-go-round of madness that was there. They were ticking boxes, and I think that many of the people I spoke from the LTA and the British players, they were like, and the other players who played were like, there was a huge chance of a boycott, and the only way that they said there wasn't going to be a boycott, because many players said no, we won't go to play, it was because the money was still there, and also that there was peace spoken behind the scenes by many of the Russian players and the Belarusian players said, look, it's okay, we'll get through this. So that, because basically there had to be done, and I do know that one of the players who, I won't say what round, but they reached the last four of the men's, actually gave money to to a small little fund that they have in the men's game, because they have a grown little union within it to help guys who would have basically, many players go and they qualify to get into the first round, and that pays them to then pays for the rest of the tour obligations for the rest of the year and so on. So that money was paid down, was very decent. They do it anyway. It doesn't matter. It could be Russia this year. It could be Germany next year. Wherever they do. So sorry, Andrew. Over to you. Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, Esau put it brilliantly there. But sadly, there's one part which I know she's fully aware of, but unfortunately, what sells papers is going to be asked. The tennis community itself, and by that I mean the players themselves, the people on tour who have relentless schedules. I would like to think that they at least have conversations. And from what we've heard, there have been communications. Like you mentioned, the Russian and Belarusian players have not stayed silent within at least their own community. Now, there is no way that tennis players or organisers can control what media ask at that point. If they ask questions that they do not like, perhaps in the future their accreditation will be rescinded, who knows. But in a press conference, there's no way they can control that sort of stuff. So I hope they realise that what they can control is at least, look, we're not necessarily going to agree with each other on everything, but we're going to listen to each other. We know that we are not all responsible for everything that goes on outside our circle, but we are responsible for what goes on inside our circle. I hope there is at least that. There's a recognition of athletes competing against each other. What their personal opinions are, I cannot even begin to want or wish to control or persuade. That's their own opinions. But when it comes to tennis, let's try and keep the tennis at first and foremost and front of all of our minds. How this tournament is covered, I don't suspect we'll see a great deal of change in the coverage from the media, but it'd be nice to think if the players themselves can respect each other on a professional level. Personal level, you have your own opinions, that's fine. On a professional level, let's be professional. If you're going to enter a tournament, compete. Outside, it's up to you.
Well, I think it does come down. I mean, for example, Kostyuk, she's playing Sakari, the Greek 8th seed, I think it is. So she'll be gone early. Sakari's more of a hardcore player in clay, but she should still be too good for Kostyuk. So a lot of the Ukrainian players, they won't be expected to get so far. It's not their surface. Grass is not theirs. Clay, yeah, they'll do well on it, but they won't. So that could very quickly just, if they're gone within the first week, if they're not there, then I think then people will focus on the tennis. But there is that kind of danger, and hopefully, I do think the British tennis media, the American tennis media, I was very surprised by who I have. I don't have little time for it, but a lot of criticism of some of their behaviour, so they say, but they're very much on the ball on this, and we do know that Venus Williams is back in playing. I think she's turned 40 this year, so she's there as a wild card, and she's playing Ukrainian in the first round as well. Elena Svitolina, she's a lovely girl, very, very nice player, and she got as people say, she got a sympathy card in, but Elena's one good people on tour. She also was top 10. Well, I think she's top 5 actually at one stage. Might be wrong on that, but I think she's top 5, maybe top 10. So it's good to get her back in and sort of as well. She's there. She's one of the good people in the tour. Should mention as well, Neil Skupski, the Liverpool player, I think three times winner of the mixed double, so he'll be going again as well. That's for Great Britain. On that note, I'm going to ask you both. We can change, of course, next week. Who do you reckon is going to win the men's? Who's going to win the women's? Iseult, men's and women's.
Women's is I think women's, anyone in the top 5 seeds could win. I think it's hit and miss, and I think that's why I enjoy the women's tournament more. Men's, I can't see past Djokovic. I just can't. So I will probably watch the men's. I'll enjoy the opening rounds and the earlier rounds. Once it gets towards the end, I think it'll feel very much like a formality. Even though Djokovic has a habit of dragging out some of his games and matches, just because occasionally you feel like he only warms up by the time he gets to the third set. I think that's just him being moody. Women's, I honestly think it's an open competition. What I would advise for anyone who isn't necessarily a huge tennis fan, but if they're picking up bits and pieces, if you see the wheelchair tennis come on, even for a second on your coverage, stop and watch it. As someone who's been to Wimbledon, that was always the highlight, getting to stop and watch that, because it is the greatest showing of dexterity, skill, and just once you start watching it, you become addicted, genuinely.
You know what? I used to always love watching mixed doubles at the end of the day, especially the second week, and also the Masters. When the Masters come into play, and you'd have just some of the best fun, most skillful tennis, and just fun.
when we've got to a stage where one side of the tournament is so predictable, it makes it more enjoyable when you have things you can go and just watch and go, oh, I wouldn't normally tune into this. If I saw it on TV, I might flick by. Now I'm going to stop and enjoy it.
That's it. By the way, going for his third. Neil Scoop's going for his third. Thank you. He's 1-2. Andrew, who are your picks for the top?
Yeah, well, I mean, he sort of said it. Djokovic just stands out a mile for me in the men's. I'd be interested to see how Carlos Alcaraz handles the relatively newfound pressure. I mean, he's been right at the top of his game for a while, a few months at least now. But Djokovic is a machine. He's an absolute monster. I mean that in a positive sense, by the way. His personality is an entirely separate thing. I mean, I would like to see some British representation, I suppose. I mean, Cameron Noy is the highest ranked. I guess he'll be.
Are you calling him British representation? Are we really sticking with that line?
Look, listen. This is how it works. This is the rule. When they represent, when they're playing at Wimbledon, they're British. Every other time, well,
I know.
You know what I mean. We've had years of
I joke.
Now, in the women's game, I'll be honest. I haven't watched a great deal of women's tennis recently, but I don't know. I mean, Coco Gauff is an interesting character, should we say? Will have a fair bit of attention, like you mentioned, from the American tennis media. So perhaps it'd be nice to see some high octane tennis to win. I did see one interesting stat, which since the 1970s or 1980s, the average length of a Wimbledon match has increased by about 25%, 30%. Now, I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. Actually, I would argue, technically, that is proof that players are competing more equally, simply because that's what makes the game drag out longer. I want to see serious high octane tennis. Whoever plays not just the grind players down, but the dexterity, the speed of thought. That's what I want to see. So
we want to see Rafael Nadal. We want to see Nadal, but on grass. That's what we want.
Yeah.
Well, the one good thing I'll say is that, like, with all of the politics around it, there is some great news in terms of for women's tennis, in that you've got 2 Arab women there in the top 32 seeds. You've got Ons Jabeur, of course, from Tunisia, who we all know, husband from Russia, very good player, tough player. She's come on as she's gotten older. She's actually just found her. She's moved up when a lot of players were like moving out, and now she's kind of at the peak of her game right now. She is like she got another year and then she's done. And Maya Sharif from Egypt, who's the 31st seed, again, a very interesting player to watch. She's going to be fun to watch as well. She's a big hitter. Don't know how far she's going to get. She's a tall enough girl. She's about 6 foot. Trained in America, and interesting, I know that someone who's mentioned that they're near Pepperdine. That's where she went to university. She did 2 years in Pepperdine, so she's a very good player. Her sister played as well, and again, it's great to see that the development for players from countries who would you wouldn't expect players to come out of, like Egypt, for example, especially for the women's side of the game. So it's great to see that. So, and that, I'll say thank you very, very much, Andrew, Isolt. See you both next Sunday. Isolt, thank you very, very much. And again, we should say congratulations that you're now Mrs. So we were congratulating.
Going strong. 2 weeks hasn't left yet, and he had to sit through 2 different boxing cards on 2 different screens last night while I yelled at both of them and refused to turn down the volume on either.
Dedication and love. There you go. That's love. And thank you very, very much to both of you, and folks.
See you all next week.
See you all next week. Exactly. Thank you, so. Again, you can follow us all you want to get all the updated news and information, views and previews on our Telegram channel at _sports. So until next week, I'll say take care of yourselves and each other, and have a great sports week, because there's a lot going on. And remember, tennis, cycling, and whatever happens in France as well. So until then, take care.